the Philippine fleet who traveled all the way from Subic to join us today. Thank you. From our retired officials, we have retired Lieutenant General Ed Adan. Thank you, sir, for joining us. Rear Admiral Jose Renan Suarez. Thank you, sir, for joining us today. We also have retired Brigadier General Arwin Pagkalinawan. Thank you, sir. And also Mrs. Pia Contiveros. Thank you, ma'am, for joining us. And from our friends from the private sector, we thank Mr. Jaime Alfonso Zobel de Ayala, Executive Director of the Ayala Corporation, for joining us this afternoon. Thank you. And Attorney Jerry Marasigan, Chairman of BCDA. Thank you, sir. We also have former Secretary Ronald Diamas, who is with us this afternoon. Thank you, sir. As well as former Secretary Rafael Alunan. We are also honored to have with us former Secretary Ricky Carandang this afternoon. Thank you for joining us. Thank you, sir. So to start our program, may we ask everyone to rise for the singing of the Philippine National Anthem, to be followed by the National Anthem of the United States, to be sung by Miss Harriet Warmby.
Kayang magiliw, peles nagsilanganan, alab ng puso, sa dibdib mo'y buhay. Lupang hinirang, tuyang ka ng magiting, sa manlulupin, di ka pa sisiin, sa dagat at bundok, sa simoy at sa langit ng bukaw, may dilag ang tula at awit sa paglayang minamahal. Ang kislap ng watawat mo'y tagumpay ng nangihingi, ang bituin at araw na kailan pangay di magdidilim. Lupa ng araw ng buwan at ipagsinta, buhay ay langit sa piling mo. Aming ligaya na pag may mga hapi, ang mamatay na dahil sa'yo. Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light, was so proudly we hailed at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight o'er the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming, and the rockets' red glare, those bombs bursting in there, gave food to the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say, does that star-spangled banner yet wave o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave?
Thank you, Miss Harriet Warmby. You may all take your seats. Thank you. To formally welcome us all and set the stage for our discussion, I would like to call on the President of Strat-Based Institute, Professor Victor Andres Dindo Manhit, to give the welcome message.
Good noon to everyone, and welcome. I know it was a stormy day or stormy weekend, but it is my pleasure to once again host United States Undersecretary for Policy Elbridge Colby, a good friend of the Strat-Based Institute. This marks our third engagement with him. First, during the height of COVID. So we did a virtual launch of his book in the Philippines, The Strategy of Denial. And again in 2023, after the Shangri-La Dialogue, uh, he decided to pass by Manila. So we had a round table just across Manila Polo at Manila Golf. And it was also a rainy weekend. So Monday was also quite rainy, but we're so happy that he's back. Now, in a position central to shaping the United States defense policy. At a time when the Philippines-United States alliance carries perhaps greater weight than at any point in recent memory, conversations such as today's remind us of the importance of strong and trusted partnerships in an increasingly complex geopolitical and geoeconomic environment. Filipinos are quite clear about the partners they trust. The United States consistently ranks first among the countries they want the Philippine government to work with in defending our seas, most especially in defending the West Philippine Sea, and advancing our economic security. Today, that is precisely what we hope to explore, how this trust can be translated into a stronger, more capable, and more resilient alliance that responds to present challenges and contributes to a free and open, rules-based Indo-Pacific. Again, thank you everyone for joining us and looking forward to the discussions this noontime.
Thank you, Professor Manhit, for your welcome remarks. We are also very much pleased to be joined today by His Excellency Babe Romualdez. Thank you, sir, for joining us. And also Her Excellency Yulia Fediv of Ukraine. Thank you, ma'am, for joining us. As well as from the Philippine Coast Guard. Yes, please, let's give them a round of applause. Philippine Coast Guard Commodore Colarina. Thank you, sir, for joining us this afternoon. So we are deeply honored to have with us today the United States Undersecretary of War for Policy, Honorable Elbridge Colby. In this role, Undersecretary Colby serves as the principal policy advisor to the Secretary of War, leading the development of the National Defense Strategy and representing the department in engagements with foreign governments and interagency partners. He brings deep expertise in great power competition and defense strategy. During President Trump's first term, he served as the Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense for Strategy and Force Development, where he authored the landmark 2018 National Defense Strategy, a document that sharpened U.S. focus on the challenge from China and elevated the importance of allied burden sharing. A Harvard College and Yale Law School graduate, Undersecretary Colby has spent his career at the intersection of national security and foreign policy, including field experience with the State Department in Iraq. Please join me in welcoming Undersecretary Elbridge Colby for his remarks.
Well, thank you to StratBase. Thank you to Professor Manhit for the generous introduction. Thank you very much to the StratBase team. It really is a pleasure to be here with a lot of friends and able to address this distinguished audience in one of our greatest friends in the world, the Philippines, one of the United States' very closest ally, and of course, an extraordinary people-to-people relationship. And I'm personally honored and grateful to be here and following meeting with President Marcos this morning, which was, of course, a distinct personal honor. So wonderful to be here, wonderful to be back in Manila, across the way from the golf club, now at the Polo Club, so I feel like I'm making the rounds, but thank you very much. This is actually my first official trip to Southeast Asia as the Undersecretary of War for Policy, but as I was just saying, starting here in Manila is deeply fitting. The Philippines is our oldest mutual defense treaty ally in Asia, and we share a deep and abiding historical connection in addition to our profound alignment of strategic interest. From Manila, I will be traveling onward to Jakarta, Bangkok, and Phnom Penh. As in Manila, I intend to deliver a clear message that is at once both realistic and perhaps bracing, but also reassuring, that America's interests are more engaged than ever in the Indo-Pacific, and that we at the Department of War are concentrated on ensuring those interests are stoutly defended. This means a strong and growing U.S. investment in the region. but it is also coupled with a newfound but common sense expectation of much greater effort and contribution by our allies and partners. Not in a hectoring or unbalanced way, to the contrary, in a spirit of partnership, not dependency, of realism, not idle cloud castle abstraction, of respect, not patronization. Our approach, as laid out in the administration's national security strategy and national defense strategy, and set out eloquently by Secretary Hegseth in his Shangri-La speeches this year and last, is straightforward. Our legacy foreign policy of the post-Cold War period was fundamentally out of date and ill-advised. In the years following the collapse of the Soviet Union, American strategy was characterized by high-flown abstractions and comfortable illusions of permanent unipolarity. Washington's strategic approach became unmoored from the concrete realities of power, geography, economics, and limits. Our foreign policy became detached from clear-headed strategic rationality, and the results were demonstrably poor. President Trump has reversed that failed course. Under Secretary Hegseth's leadership at the Pentagon, we are carrying out the president's agenda to restore America's strength, put Americans' concrete interests first, and do so in a way that updates our relationships around the world and puts them on a much sounder footing. As we see it, President Trump's approach to foreign policy is one of common sense. Accordingly, he is recalibrating America's foreign policy to serve the practical, concrete interests of regular Americans, with significant implications from defense to trade to counter-narcotics to migration. To be clear, this is not some dramatic abandonment of America's historic foreign policy. Actually, quite to the contrary. It is a return to the best tradition of America's foreign policy, of a hard-nosed, clear-eyed Republican realism that puts our people's concrete interests first, but in ways that also align with the interests of many other countries. It is not isolation, but rather a business-like recalibration, a model of collaborative self-interest, enlightened self-interest, yes, but very much practical and pragmatic rather than ideological or rigid. In Europe, we talk about this as NATO 3.0, a rejection of the fanciful era of post-Cold War talking shop NATO, and a return to the tradition of the hard-nosed Atlantic alliance of the Cold War period, focused on the core business of military strength and readiness. In the Western Hemisphere, meanwhile, we see the Trump corollary as a return to the best tradition of the Monroe Doctrine, of a policy designed to empower and enable the countries of Latin America to deal with the serious challenges we together face in the Western Hemisphere. In both of these regions, despite a lot of sniping in the outlets of the old order, we see real, concrete, and indeed accelerating momentum to join us in building new, more pragmatic, and more durable partnerships with our allies and partners. NATO is demonstrably much stronger than it was before President Trump's leadership. And in the Western Hemisphere, countries across the region are joining us in efforts like the America's Counter-Cartel Coalition initiative to combat the scourge of narco-terrorism that afflicts us all. We see similar trends here in Asia. Countries in the region know that we are not embarking on some novel approach of retrenchment. That is the cheap talk of the cognoscenti. Instead, countries here in Asia understand that America is returning to a traditional, time-tested strategy of flexible realism, clarity about our priorities, seriousness about deterrence, and an understanding of the value of both forcefulness and diplomacy. It is the foreign policy of common sense. Viewing the world through this lens, we see Asia as of paramount importance. The national security strategy states in plain terms that in order, quote, to thrive at home, we must successfully compete, end quote, here. The national defense strategy, meantime, lays out that maintaining U.S. access to this critical region has, quote, exceptionally real, indeed fundamental implications, end quote, for America's vital interests. And as Secretary Hegseth said at the Shangri-La dialogue in Singapore, quote, a Pacific dominated by any hegemon would unravel the regional balance of power and undermine the equilibrium we all seek to preserve, end quote. This long-standing view of the United States in Asia free of hegemony has been at the core of our regional approach since the earliest days of our republic. America's interests here in the Indo-Pacific region are therefore clear, abiding, and profound, and not in some vague way, but in the concrete, practical sense that this region will be the world's largest market. It is where not only scale is, but growth as well, including especially here in ASEAN. This is not a new observation. Indeed, this recognition of the importance of Asia is also a return to the deep roots of American foreign policy. Such an understanding of the rising importance of Asia and its economic heft goes back not only to the post-World War II period, but to the 19th century, to the open door, the opening of Japan, and of course America's presence here in the Philippines, as well as across the Pacific in places like Hawaii and Samoa. In light of these factors, as the National Security Strategy says, our driving and abiding purpose is to maintain a favorable balance of power in the Indo-Pacific. From a defense perspective, as that seminal document makes clear, this requires us to maintain a posture of deterrence by denial along the first island chain. As Secretary Hegseth put it at the 2026 Shangri-La Dialogue, quote, "We will build and sustain a strong denial defense in the Western Pacific that ensures aggression is infeasible, escalation unattractive, and war deemed irrational," end quote. This is what we at the Pentagon are focused on building and sustaining here in this region. And the results and progress are clear, not only in our operations and activities, but in the unprecedented degree of investment reflected in the administration's fiscal year 2027 defense budget. But to be clear, this strong and focused approach is fully consistent with an active and creative diplomacy aimed at promoting strategic stability and reducing pressures toward conflict. To many today in Washington and in the elite commentariat, this seems hard to wrap their heads around. But it is simple common sense and indeed in the best traditions of American foreign policy. Dwight Eisenhower, Richard Nixon, and Henry Kissinger, and yes, Ronald Reagan, all both sought to strengthen America's military position while simultaneously actively engaging at the highest levels with our potential opponents. As Winston Churchill himself put it, it is better to jaw than war. Indeed, this is much closer to the ASEAN way than Washington's foreign policy of the last generation. Our understanding of the ASEAN way is that it is defined by pragmatism, an openness to dialogue, respect for counterparts, proud nationalism, and a focus on economic prosperity. The United States is now taking a page from the ASEAN way. These are also the key themes of President Trump's administration. This is not an approach that purports to stand in judgment of every action by other countries, as has been so typical of the post-Cold War American approach here in the region. We will, of course, stick to and stand for our principles, but we will not hold hostage progress on key issues of strategic importance because of them. The concrete, practical progress with many countries here in ASEAN over the last 18 months shows that. We may not agree on everything, but we respect your countries, your independent pathways, your nationalism, and the reality of our shared interest to work together collaboratively wherever we can. In summary, then, our approach is one of flexible realism, of building strength in ways that are durable and achieve their intended effect, of genuine peace through strength rather than rhetorical pressurization without adequate material strength and resolve. In other words, strong and clear but quiet, as Secretary Hegseth puts it, not peacocking, but the intelligent, realistic, and quiet development and demonstration of strength. Now, I acknowledge that this is a different reality than what you might hear if you confine yourself to listening only to the panjandrums of the global elite or their most prominent outlets. There, you will read or hear a different story, that America is in retreat or decline or too unreliable, and that Asian countries are fleeing from working with us. Now, let me say the commentariat plays an important role and often makes valuable points, but they are missing the reality of the situation here, perhaps not seeing it, and in some cases, perhaps not wishing to admit to seeing it. Governments in the region here, though, do not have this luxury. For them, and for those in the commentariat who wish seriously to help governments here understand what is happening, I humbly advise looking at the reality of the situation. If you do this, you will quickly observe a far different reality than what is commonly presented. First, America is decidedly not in decline. Our economy under President Trump's leadership is growing, and indeed substantially outgrowing the other OECD economies. Our technology remains at the world's forefront, and in key respects, we are extending our lead. In fact, it now seems increasingly likely that America will remain the largest economy in nominal GDP terms for the foreseeable future, something that would not have been so clear a decade ago. Second, America is definitely not disengaging from Asia. To the contrary, our vital national interests dictate our enduring presence here. What the commentariat frequently misinterprets as disengagement or retrenchment is in reality a disciplined and necessary strategic prioritization. We are replacing the hollow, merely symbolic engagement of previous decades with a formidable, resource-backed posture calibrated to actual structural realities. We are not leaving. In fact, we are digging in to ensure a favorable balance of power where it matters most. Third, contrary to the hubbub, you most definitely can cooperate with America. In fact, there are new vistas opening up to do so. But the terms of engagement have changed. Allow me to try to explain this. There is a canard out there that America today is too unreliable to work with anymore. That is a combination of wrong and missing the point. Before, America was at the same time calculable from a negotiating point of view, but frequently rigid and ideologically fixed on liberal shibboleths. Under President Trump's visionary leadership, we have a new approach defined by common sense. It is true that America now drives a harder bargain, but that is downstream of Republican realism oriented on actually putting Americans first. Under President Trump's leadership, the simple fact is that countries can no longer take America for granted. No longer can countries simply assume America will go along with unbalanced relationships that are not clearly in Americans' practical interests. We are proud to implement that in the defense arena, where this has very clear and direct implications in terms of pressing allies to spend more on defense, for instance. But saying countries can no longer take America for granted is definitely not the same thing as saying we cannot be dealt with. To the contrary, rather, if you approach us as we approach you, with a practical mindset, focused on delivering results that reflect a reasonable balance in the relationship, you will find us willing partners, and indeed more willing than past administrations, which were hidebound by outdated convention or rigid adherence to liberal dogma. Moreover, the reality that is well appreciated by governments in this region, but not always by the commentariat, is that a strong, constructive relationship with America is a vital anchor for our shared strategic and economic future. I say that not with arrogance, but with a spirit of candor and respect. America is the world's largest market, with its dominant global currency and its best companies and technologies. America is making enormous investments in key areas like artificial intelligence and rare earths. On the defense side, America has the world's strongest military and makes the best military equipment at an unparalleled scale. The American defense budget is already the world's largest, and we are actively seeking to substantially grow it. Now, this is not to say you should only deal with us, and certainly not to frame our goals as hegemonic. To the contrary, we seek partnerships, not dependencies, and we understand that countries will engage widely, just as we do. But it is to counsel rejecting the delusion of fashionable but superficial ideas like middle power alliances designed to exclude America. To be clear, we encourage collaboration among allies and partners, as well as efforts to build up their defense industrial capacities as part of increased defense spending in line with the new global standards set by the 2025 Hague NATO Summit. But such efforts by our allies and close partners should integrate and be complementary with America's, not vainly and futilely seek to exclude or supplant us. The watchwords should be strategies of practicality, pragmatism, and realism, not the buzzword deep strategies of international conferences. Now, this should come naturally here in Southeast Asia, where these attitudes are commendably habitual. Our advice to governments here in the region and beyond is to focus on the structural realities and what America under President Trump's leadership is actually doing and offering, and not on the picture that some of the commentariat paints. Of course, commentary is important and has its rightful place. But to be frank, I think much of the commentary on the Trump administration and what it is doing has more to do with the realm of words, symbols, and political reaction rather than actually helping us to understand reality. There are certainly many noble exceptions, but much of the conventional wisdom out there misses what is really happening. Take this issue of middle powers. There has been a lot of discussion on that issue. If you confine yourself to the commentary, you might come away with one impression. But if you look at the reality of the situation, as we advise, you come away with another one. Thus, if you focus on words and symbols, you might think that a declaration by a group of leaders to build a new type of plane or space asset is the result, or the convening and agreeing of a conference on increasing military strength is the result. We ourselves, though, look at whether that plane or satellite was delivered or is likely to be delivered, and whether that platform has the required level of quality and mission suitability and so forth. We humbly advise you to do the same. Or take, for example, the announcements of new multilateral security frameworks regarding maritime cooperation. While these agreements often generate favorable headlines, we evaluate them by a much harder but more important metric. Do they actually result in more ships in the water, expanded stockpiles of critical munitions, and genuine interoperability? A signed piece of paper or a newly formed working group does not deter coercion. Fielded hard power and the demonstrated political will to use it do. Fortunately, I think my message here is already well understood by regional governments. In fact, we see a wide chasm between the narrative described by some of the cognoscenti as compared to what we experience with governments in this region. Our counterparts in Manila, Bangkok, Jakarta, Singapore, Hanoi, Kuala Lumpur, and elsewhere, who have regular and frequent conversations with us, know exactly what the War Department has been doing. There is no confusion about our strategy and approach among those who actually bear the responsibility for national defense. They know that we are actively expanding our forward posture, accelerating the delivery of hard combat capabilities in the theater, and building out the physical architecture of a true denial defense. Under the leadership of President Trump and Secretary Hegseth, we are speaking softly and carrying a big stick. As Secretary Hegseth has said, we are pursuing an approach that is strong and clear but quiet. They know that we do not feel the need to engage in needless, loud, rhetorical provocations to prove our resolve. They understand that we judge strength not by the volume of moralizing speeches we deliver or the number of attendees at multilateral summits, but rather through hard capability, through posture, through industrial readiness, and through the quiet, relentless strengthening of deterrence. This is both what we are focused on and how we expect to be measured and judged. And they are equally clear about what we are doing. We are putting our alliances on a sustainable, realistic, and durable footing for the long haul. When we ask our allies and partners to step up, to invest more in their own defense, and to take responsibility for their own sovereign security, we are not signaling abandonment. We are doing the exact opposite. We are inviting you to build a true partnership. That is motivated by our practical judgment that alliances are most durable when they are based on shared responsibility, mutual interests governed by pragmatic respect and underwritten by real capability on both sides, rather than permanent dependency. We are looking for partners, not protectorates. When our partners are strong, deterrence is strong. And that is exactly what we have here in Manila under the leadership of President Marcos, Secretary of National Defense Teodoro, and other key leaders. We see and respect a resolute and proud nation in the Philippines that is determined to strengthen its own capabilities to better defend itself and its interests, a model ally. I commend the Philippines for its outstanding leadership of ASEAN during its chairmanship this year, guiding the region with a clear-headed pragmatism that matches the strategic demands of our time. And with our allies and partners throughout this region, we are actively building a strong denial defense to back up a peace through strength approach of a lastingly favorable balance of power in Asia. We are systematically strengthening our forward posture, hardening our footprint, and driving deep interoperability with key countries that are willing to shoulder their share of the burden. This is not merely about performing in symbolic exercises for the cameras. It is about fielding combat-credible forces capable of defeating real military aggression. That is what we mean by strong and clear. The proof of our success is evident in the results of our efforts in this critical region. The success of our strategy and the very foundation of this denial defense rests on the concrete, practical partnerships we are building and modernizing across the region, including here in Southeast Asia. Here in the Philippines, our alliance is undergoing a historic modernization rooted in profound mutual respect. We are co-investing in resilient infrastructure, training on cutting-edge capabilities, and operationalizing our enhanced defense cooperation agreement sites. This is not a one-sided partnership. The Philippines is stepping up, taking the lead to defend itself, and investing more to modernize its military and Coast Guard. We are backing up those investments with concrete, visible support, including the rotational deployment of 4 fast response cutters to actively partner with the Philippine Coast Guard in patrolling and securing your exclusive economic zone. By strengthening our joint posture, we are ensuring that both our nations possess the hard capabilities required to deter aggression. With Thailand, our oldest diplomatic partner in Asia and only mainland ally, we are accelerating the pace and scope of our strong defense relationship. Rather than giving ideological lectures, the Department of War is focused on what practically matters to both of us, transforming legacy exercises into high-end, combat-credible training that actually tests our joint warfighting readiness and ensures that our forces can operate together efficiently. We view Indonesia as a pivotal strategic actor, and we are engaging Jakarta with deep respect for its proud traditions and history. Through our major defense cooperation partnership announced earlier this year, our relationship is growing substantially. We are focused on tangible defense modernization and deep interoperability, including through enhanced joint special forces training that directly bolsters Jakarta's sovereign capabilities. We want a strong, independent Indonesia capable of securing its own vast archipelago. Our partnerships with Vietnam and Malaysia are compelling examples of flexible realism in action. In both cases, we leave yesterday's ideological preconditions at the door. We are stripping away diplomatic platitudes and focusing strictly on the intersection of our national interests, advancing practical maritime domain awareness, and providing the hard power tools necessary to protect their sovereign rights and resist external encroachment. And in Singapore, we see the ultimate model of pragmatic business-like cooperation. Without the need for an overarching ideological framework, we have built a deeply mutual beneficial relationship based on a clear-eyed read of the region's security environment. By supporting U.S. rotational forces, Singapore is an anchor of U.S. posture in the region, demonstrating that our presence is actively welcome when it is grounded in shared security and economic realities rather than patronizing heavy-handedness. Across the region, from Manila to Bangkok, from Jakarta to Phnom Penh, we are pursuing ambitious, interest-based partnerships that respect national sovereignty and directly contribute to collective deterrence. Now, nor I stress is the Department of War alone in this effort. What Secretary Rubio announced during his recent visit to Manila is a preview of the consistent and effective diplomacy our defense strategy complements and supports. Looking ahead, let me be clear about how we will measure success in this critical region over the next several years. Executing a strategy of flexible realism will deliver an Indo-Pacific that is demonstrably more secure, structurally resilient, and self-reliant. Consistent with the national security strategy, our priority is to field a fully operational, resilient architecture of denial defense stretching along the first island chain. This includes robust distributed theater logistics and prepossession assets in the Western Pacific. We are committed to building this shared logistics infrastructure alongside our allies and partners, ensuring we can sustain combat credible power where it matters most. Yet this defense architecture cannot rest on American shoulders alone. It must be upheld by a network of highly capable sovereign nations that have modernized their own forces and stepped up to secure their own territory, transforming our relationships into true partnerships of equals. Because these modernized alliances will be grounded in mutual respect and pragmatic cooperation, they will be durable, deeply rooted in shared national interests. Ultimately, these hard power realities serve a single overriding objective: maintaining a genuinely favorable balance of power in the region. By fielding combat credible forces, we will make aggression demonstrably infeasible and ensure deterrence is stout, resulting in a durable balance of power. This is not about empty rhetoric. It is the time-tested historical recipe for lasting peace. And beneath that umbrella of security, the sovereign nations of this region and the United States alongside them can focus on what we all do best: fostering the dynamic, growing economies that will define prosperity in this 21st century. Let me close by returning to the central theme of our approach: strong and clear, but quiet. We will mean what we say and say what we mean. We will not engage in peacocking or moralizing speeches. We will continue to speak softly, but we will continue to carry the world's biggest stick. We will maintain our peerless and formidable strength here in the world's key region. We will achieve peace through strength and common sense. This is the spirit we carry in this critical region. We extend our hand to work with countries throughout Asia in a spirit of partnership, respect, and pragmatism. We invite you to take advantage of this extraordinary opportunity of an administration guided by common sense and realism, not rigidity and pretensions of moralistic superiority. There is an historic opening for us to work together more deeply and more practically. Let us seize this opportunity together. Thank you very much. Okay. Okay. Yeah, sure.
Thank you very much, Undersecretary Colby. May we now invite on stage to moderate this session Professor Victor Andres Tindomanhit for the highlight of our afternoon program, the Fireside Chat.